In 2023, 15 kindergartners and 2 staff members left on a school field trip and never came back. No bus, no bodies, not even a footprint. For 8 weeks, all we had were theories until a fisherman's net caught hold of something it wasn't meant to. And what surfaced in that black plastic sack would open a door we were never supposed to walk through. Before we start, tap subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's Dana Rowe. I'm 41 and I've lived in Greenhorn Hills, Texas most of my life. I taught kindergarten at our local elementary school for 16 years. It's the kind of small town where folks wave when they pass your car and nothing ever really changes. Not the diner's chipped coffee cups, not the stubborn pothole on Maple Street, and certainly not the rhythm of the school year. Every May, we'd take the kids on one final field trip before summer break. Something outdoors, hands-on. Let them burn off the last of their energy before the long heat rolled in. That year, we picked Banner's Farm. It was a local spot, family-run, no more than a 25-minute drive. Petting zoo corn maze strawberry patch. We'd been there before. I remember that morning clearer than I'd like. 15 kids, all 5 and 6 years old, bright-eyed arms full of packed lunches, most of them too excited to sit still. We had 3 adults going myself, Ms. Lorraine Briggs, my co-teacher, and Coach Tom Reyes. Lorraine had this big curly hair and a voice like a bell. Tom was young, fresh out of college, always wearing those bright white running shoes and a grin that could calm any storm. I trusted them both. I still do. We arrived at the farm around 9:30. I remember the sun already getting high, pushing into the 90s. The children disembarked in pairs lined up just like we'd practiced. Lorraine and Tom took them toward the cornfield for the tour while I stayed behind to meet with Clay Banner, the owner. He needed payment and a signature for the school's insurance. Nothing unusual. We chatted longer than I'd meant to. Clay was polite, talked about how dry the season had been, how the farm was struggling. I remember glancing at the dusty floorboards in his office, wondering how many groups had come through before us. It didn't feel dangerous. It just felt worn. I rejoined the group maybe half an hour later. But when I stepped outside, the cornfield was still. No laughter, no voices, no one waving from between the rows. I waited a few minutes, thinking maybe they'd just moved on to the next stop. But the workers didn't know where they were. No one had seen them leave. There was no sign at all. That's the moment my stomach turned. The air didn't feel hot anymore. It felt empty. But that's not where this started, not really. Looking back, I can tell you there were signs. Subtle ones. A delivery truck I didn't recognize pulling around the back of the barn. A man I'd never seen before talking low to Daryl, one of the farm hands. A strange-looking feather caught in the gravel near the fence, bright blue-green and gold. I'd never seen a bird like that out here, not in Texas. At the time, I let it go. Chalked it up to a tired imagination and a long year. But then, 8 weeks later, I got the call. It was Detective Mark Elwell. He said a fisherman had pulled something out of the bay, something I might want to see. And I knew before I even asked that my life was about to divide into 2 parts before that phone call and everything after. When I pulled up to the dock in Matagorda Bay, I could already see the cluster of patrol cars. Their lights weren't flashing, but their presence alone felt loud, too loud for a place like that. The air smelled like salt and diesel, and gulls circled overhead like they were waiting for something. I parked, crooked, didn't even shut my door. My hands were shaking, but I tried to keep my face neutral as I walked up to the boat where Detective Elwell was standing. He waved me over without saying much and introduced me to a fisherman, Buckley Grant. Weathered man, probably in his 60s, with skin like tanned leather and eyes that didn't blink too much. He just nodded and said, "Ma'am, I'm real sorry." I told him thank you, but my voice cracked. He didn't look away, just pointed to a black plastic sack sitting on the deck of his boat. caught it in my net this morning, heavy as hell. I thought maybe sea trash. But then I saw the colors. I stepped onto the boat, and one of the officers handed me gloves. My knees didn't want to cooperate, but I crouched beside the bag anyway. Opened it carefully. The smell hit first wet nylon salt water, something else I couldn't place. Inside were 6 backpacks. Bright red, pink, green, blue, still vivid like they hadn't been under long. And they hadn't. I could tell that just by looking. Fabric still firm, zippers smooth. These were the exact bags we gave out at Greenhorn Hills at the start of every school year. I reached for the blue one on top, opened the flap, and found the white label inside. Permanent marker, just like I'd instructed the parents, Alvin Torres. I showed it to Elwell. My throat was too tight to say much, but he didn't need me to. He just nodded, expression like stone. I named the others as I pulled them from the sack. Zoe, Mila, Jalen, Noah, Emma. 6 kids, 6 names, all mine, and all gone. The bags had rocks in them, heavy ones, not something a child would have picked up on a nature walk. These were placed deliberate, meant to sink them, but they weren't heavy enough, not permanently. Buckley said the current must have moved them around till his net got them. Elwell agreed. If they'd been in the water long, we'd be seeing damage. These haven't been here more than a few days, he said. I was still crouched there staring at the rocks when I asked him the question I hadn't dared voice in 8 weeks. Does this mean they're dead? He hesitated, then pulled me aside. We haven't found bodies, he said quietly, and in open water we would have. That tells me this might not be a murder case, might be a kidnapping. I remember thinking the word sounded clinical, too small for what had happened. I asked him if he thought Lorraine and Tom were involved. He said it was possible, but so was a third party. That area's remote, not much security. A lot of truck routes pass through. Someone could have taken advantage. He wanted to revisit the farm the next day, said we needed a new look, a fresh eye. As we walked back toward the squad cars, another officer came up and whispered something to him. Elwell sighed, then turned to me. With this new direction, we have to re-interview all involved parties. That includes you. I was too stunned to respond at first. Me, I asked. I've done everything you asked. Cooperated from day one. I know, he said, and I appreciate it. But you weren't with the group when they disappeared. We need to be thorough. I told him fine. Take whatever he needed, my phone, email, social media. He nodded and called over a younger officer, Mendez. He'll ride with you. We'll go over everything at the station. I didn't argue. What would be the point? The drive back felt like it took a year. Mendez didn't speak much, just stared straight ahead, hands resting on his lap. I finally said, "This is ridiculous, you know. If I'd been involved, don't you think I'd be long gone by now?" He didn't answer directly, just said, "We're just following protocol." Back at the station, they brought me into one of the small interview rooms. Elwell was already there. I handed over my phone, laptop, tablet, all of it. Gave him the passwords again, though I knew they had them already. "I need you to walk me through that day," he said, "from the beginning." So I did. From the bus ride to checking in at the farm to signing papers with Clay Banner. Lorraine and Tom took the kids toward the cornfields, I said. I figured I'd meet up with them after signing the waiver and confirming the head count. I was maybe gone 30 minutes max. I explained how Clay had talked about drought conditions, how school field trips were helping his business stay afloat. All the normal things you hear on a struggling farm. When I went back out, the field was empty. No kids, no teachers, no sound. I'd walked to the edge expecting to see them reemerge. Instead, I found farmhands standing around just as confused as I was. Nobody had seen them, I said. Except one man, Daryl Quintero. Elwell asked about him. I said he'd told us he was supposed to lead part of the tour, but left to grab presentation materials from the barn. Said he was only gone 10 minutes. But when he came back, they were gone. "Did you hear anything?" "Screams vehicles?" he asked. I told him no. Nothing. That's the problem, I said. It was too quiet. He studied me a long time before speaking again. You know this situation puts you in a strange position. You're the only adult left. You didn't see it happen. You weren't with them. I felt my back straighten. You think that helps me? You think that feels like safety? My voice broke a little. I lost my job. The district let me go without even a formal hearing. I've been living off my savings, fielding calls from angry parents who think I did something. I have no friends left in that town, just guilt. He looked down at his notes, not saying anything for a while. Then a junior officer stepped in, whispered something. Elwell nodded, then looked back up at me. We've reviewed your communications calls, texts, emails. Nothing stands out. No financial anomalies. You're free to go for now, but stay local. We may need more from you soon. I asked about the parents. We'll tell them about the backpacks today, but no press release yet. If this is a kidnapping, we can't risk alerting anyone who might still be involved. I walked out of that station just after noon. The sun was high and sharp, but I didn't feel warm. My stomach was empty, but I couldn't eat. I sat in my car with the engine off, staring at the photo of my class clipped to the visor, 15 faces. Bright, curious, full of life. And now 6 backpacks pulled from the water with rocks stuffed inside them. It didn't make sense. None of it did. I didn't want to go back to my apartment, not with the way the walls pressed in on me lately. So I started driving. Back toward Greenhorn Hills. Toward the farm. Elwell had said he'd be there tomorrow, but I needed to see it again on my own terms. Maybe I'd missed something the first time. Maybe not. Either way, I wasn't ready to stop looking. And as I turned off the highway onto the gravel drive, the barn just visible ahead, I had no idea that someone was already watching, waiting, and that I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Clay Banner answered the door with a look that was more surprise than concern. He stepped aside without asking many questions and offered a chair at the kitchen table. The farmhouse was quiet, the same creaking wood floors and sun-faded curtains as the day of the trip. I told him about the backpacks, that a fisherman had pulled them from the bay that morning. His face lost a little color, and he nodded slowly, saying the police had called that they were planning to visit again the next day. I didn't push for answers. I just told him I needed to walk the grounds, see it all again for myself. He said that was fine and called for someone named Mary to show me around. She was a young woman, maybe early 20s, friendly enough but new. Said she hadn't been working the day of the field trip. We started near the driveway where the bus had dropped us off. I walked her through what had happened step by step. Lorraine and Tom took the children toward the cornfield. I'd gone into the house with Banner to sign paperwork. It had all felt routine then. Now the air felt different, hollow. The cornfield was tall and dry, brushing our shoulders as we passed through it. I asked Mary about Darryl Quintero. She pointed toward a barn at the edge of the property, said he was the only one who regularly used it. Kept most of the tools locked up in there. When I asked if we could go inside, she hesitated, then said the barn was usually padlocked. We walked over anyway. The lock was there just like she said. But something caught my eye along the bottom edge of the door, a bright flicker of color that didn't belong. I crouched down and used my fingers to work it free. It was a feather. Not a chicken feather or anything you'd expect to find on a Texas farm. This one was vibrant blue-green gold with an iridescent sheen. Almost looked painted. I turned it over in my hand while Mary leaned in. She said she'd never seen anything like it before. Must be from a migratory bird, she offered. I didn't say much, just slipped it into my pocket. Behind the barn was a small unpaved road, overgrown, gated, mostly hidden from view. When I asked where it led, Mary said it wasn't part of the main farm. Just maintenance access and some storage sheds back toward the desert. Said staff didn't go there unless they had to. We circled back toward the cornfield and moved along the path the group would have taken that day. At the far edge of this property, the rows thinned out, and we stepped into a clearing where a dirt road stretched in both directions, long, flat, and empty. I crouched down to look at the tire tracks. The soil was dry but packed. You could see the marks clearly. Some wide like tractor tires. Some narrower, more like pickup trucks or delivery vans. I asked if this road was in use often. Mary said nearby farms sometimes used it to shave off time to the highway. Banner allowed it as a favor. She was starting to look uneasy. I was about to ask more when we heard footsteps coming up from behind. Daryl was walking toward us, expression unreadable. He nodded at Mary, then at me. "Bit far from the house," he said. I kept my voice calm, told him I was just retracing the route from that day. His eyes dropped to the road, then back up at me. "It's pushing 95 out here," he said. "Ought to get back inside before you overheat." Mary's phone rang just then. She stepped away to take the call, and when she returned, she looked flustered. Said she was needed at the greenhouse. Something about the irrigation system. Daryl nodded, told her to go, that he'd walk me back. We made our way back through the corn side by side, but not speaking. The sun was harsh, but it wasn't the heat that made my skin itch. It was the silence. Inside the farmhouse, he handed me a glass of iced coffee and said Banner had stepped out to deal with a supplier. I sat at the kitchen table, trying not to look as tense as I felt. I took a small sip. It was strong and cold. Daryl sat across from me, resting his arms on the table. He watched me carefully. I pulled out the feather and set it on the table between us. Told him I'd found it outside the barn door. He didn't blink, just said, "Must have blown in. We get all kinds during migration." I told him it didn't look native, that I used to take my class bird watching each spring and had never seen anything like it. His hands tightened slightly around his glass. "Nature's full of surprises," he said. That's when I noticed his watch, sleek digital blue backlight. It tugged at something in my memory. I stared a second too long, and he noticed. This, he said, raising his wrist. "Just a cheap one. Got it at the feed store." But I knew that watch. Coach Tom had worn one just like it. Same shape, same face. He'd shown it to me during lunch duty one day. Had been proud of it, said it was good for long days on his feet. I didn't say anything right then, just tucked the feather back into my pocket. A moment later, Banner came back in. Seemed surprised I was still there. I smiled and said I was about to leave. Before I do, I added, "I think I left the feather here. Daryl had it, but I don't see it." Daryl's response was quick, too quick. Said it must have blown away. Window draft. Strange thing. I didn't remember any open window. As I stood to leave, I asked if I could use the restroom. Banner nodded, pointed me down the hall. Next to Daryl's office, he said. I walked past the half-closed door and paused. Inside, I could see the flicker of flames from a small fireplace. In July. I stepped in quietly and saw papers burning several sheets already blackened at the edges. I used a nearby fire poker to pull one free, but the print had already been eaten away. Useless. On the desk, a stack of receipts and order slips. I flipped through quickly, heart racing. One of them caught my eye, a livestock crate delivery dated 3 days after the children vanished. Destination a private dock in Corpus Christi. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. In the bathroom, I locked the door, took a quick photo of the receipt, and texted it to Detective Elwell. I told him where I'd found it, what I'd seen, and that I had the original with me. I washed my hands, dried them, and made sure the paper was fully tucked away before stepping back out. Daryl and Banner were mid-conversation when I returned. Both of them fell quiet as soon as I walked in. I smiled and thanked them again, said I'd be going, that the police would be back tomorrow. Daryl's eyes dropped to my pocket. "You've got something there," he said, tone flat but sharp. I glanced down. The corner of the receipt was still visible. I pushed it deeper into my pocket, trying not to show my nerves. "Just a grocery list," I said lightly, probably from earlier. They didn't reply. The air felt tighter now, like the walls were shrinking. Then my phone rang. It was Elwell. I stepped away to answer, pretending it was a personal call. He didn't waste time. "Dana," He said, "Where are you right now?" I told him I was still at the farm. "You need to leave, now. That receipt you sent it matches other deliveries we've been tracking. Same route, same network. I'm sending a team. Stay visible and get out." I turned slightly to glance back toward the kitchen. Daryl was staring at me. He hadn't moved. I thanked the detective quietly and said I'd head out. When I returned to the room, Daryl stood up. "Funny about that feather," he said. "Maybe we should go look again. Could have dropped somewhere else." "I really should be going," I replied, moving toward the door. He stepped in beside me. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the barn. "Won't take long." Banner started to protest, but Daryl cut him off. His hand rested against my back, not quite forceful, but firm. As we stepped out into the yard, I caught sight of his shoes, white with blue stripes. Same pair Tom Reyes used to wear every week to school. I knew them as well as I knew the school lunch menu. I remembered him joking about how they'd lasted through 4 semesters and 2 field days, and now Daryl was wearing them, just like he was wearing Tom's watch. I said nothing. My heart was pounding, but I kept walking. The barn loomed ahead, still locked, still sun-bleached and ordinary looking. But I knew what was waiting behind that door wasn't ordinary at all. And I knew as soon as he turned that key, I wasn't walking into any place meant for a visitor. The metal door groaned open and the barn smelled exactly the way you'd expect, like hay and dust and oil that had soaked into the beams over decades. But there was something else underneath it. A faint, acrid edge that didn't belong. Daryl stood behind me, one hand still on my shoulder, and gestured with the other. "After you." I stepped forward, careful not to show hesitation, though every nerve in my body was telling me to run. The air was thick, even with the daylight streaking through the gaps in the slats. There were cages, dozens of them, not the kind used for livestock. These were transport crates, metal reinforced, some marked with foreign stamps and shipping tags I couldn't read. A few were covered with burlap, others open and empty. Scattered feathers, tufts of fur, and crushed bits of straw clung to the floor. I tried to slow my breathing, let my eyes adjust. One cage in the far corner held something still could have been a leopard sedated or something close. I couldn't be sure. The animal's body rose and fell in shallow breaths. I didn't know what I was looking at, not completely, but I knew what I wasn't seeing: farm animals. Daryl stepped in beside me, arms crossed. Now no smile. "Not quite what you expected, is it?" I didn't answer. Didn't want to give him anything. Behind me, I heard the sound of the door closing, not slamming, just enough to feel like a seal had been broken. I turned slightly and saw Clay Banner standing near the threshold, hands at his sides, eyes not meeting mine. "What is this?" I asked. My voice came out low. "Dry." Daryl walked over to a crate, gave it a slight tap with his boot. "Side business," he said. "Started out small. Legal stuff, mostly. Imports, breeders. But things change." I looked back at Banner. "Is this what you signed up for?" He finally looked at me. His voice came out soft. It wasn't supposed to get this far. Daryl crossed back over to me. "The thing is, Ms. Rowe, when someone sees something they shouldn't, you can't just hope they forget." He glanced down at my pocket. "You've still got that receipt?" I didn't answer. Didn't move. He nodded once. "Thought so." He turned to Banner. "We don't have time to argue this. The truck's coming. She goes with the rest." Banner looked like he wanted to protest, but whatever line he'd drawn had already been crossed. He helped Daryl pull a large transport cage away from the wall, one of the empty ones. I backed away instinctively, but they were faster. Daryl grabbed my wrists, and Banner brought out a leather strap from a hook near the doorway. I tried to shout, but the gag was already over my mouth before I could get anything out. The rope around my ankles came next. It didn't take long. They lifted me awkwardly like I was cargo and placed me inside the cage. Daryl reached into my pocket, took the receipt, and my phone turned it off. Tossed both into a nearby toolbox. Through the bars, I could see them move quickly now. pulling covers over cages, straightening crates. A distant engine rumbled in the background, slow, low gears turning over gravel. 7 minutes early, Darrell muttered. We'll redirect them. New drop site. He looked at Banner. Tell them we move it all to the warehouse, south of the maintenance road, same place as last time. Banner hesitated, then nodded. He walked outside without another word. I was alone for a moment, just the animals and the sound of distant footsteps. I shifted in the cage, trying to test the give of the bindings. There wasn't much. My wrists had gone numb. The gag was tight. The cage rocked slightly as I moved, but it was heavy, bolted at the base. When the men came in, 3 of them, I could tell they weren't locals. Work boots, plain jeans, and shirts without logos. No eye contact. One of them walked past me speaking Spanish to Darrell. I only caught a few words, quiet woman payment. Another handed him an envelope. I watched Darrell thumb through it, then nod. Get her to the storage facility, he said. You know what to do. They rolled my cage toward the barn doors on a hydraulic lift. Outside, the light was blinding. I could hear the truck's engine, the thud of crates being loaded. As we passed the side of the vehicle, I saw inside tarps, stacked crates, some of them moving slightly. One corner held something large, striped, unmoving. Another held a cage that looked too small for whatever was in it. The heat hit me as soon as I was rolled up the ramp, thick, suffocating. The door shut behind me, sealing it all in darkness. The truck pulled away from the farm just as smoothly as it had arrived. No sirens, no shouting. Just gravel under the wheels growing fainter behind us. I couldn't see out except through the tiny slats at the top of the crate. A strip of sky. Then scrubland. Then nothing. At some point I must have passed out or slipped into something close to it. The heat made time stretch. I remember waking up to the jolt of the truck hitting a new surface, rougher like packed dirt. We weren't on a road anymore. I could hear men's voices outside shuffling unfastening latches. Then the door swung open and the light rushed in again. My cage was pulled out first. Move her to the far wall, one of the men said. She's not part of the shipment. Another replied. Then why is she here? The first man just shook his head. Orders. Quintana wants no loose ends. I was rolled across a concrete floor into a darkened corner of the warehouse. It was colder there, the walls thick and sealed. Other crates were already lined up against the walls. Some held birds, bright-colored ones. Others were silent. I heard one man say, "This complicates things. She's not like the others." Someone else said, "Then get rid of her. That's what they want." The older man, the one giving orders, stepped over and crouched beside my cage. "She's heard too much," he said quietly. "Sedate her. Make it clean." That's when I saw one of them walk off and return with a tray. A syringe. Clear liquid. They opened the cage. 3 of them held me down while the 4th approached with the needle. I caught one of them under the chin. He cursed, dropped the first syringe. Glass shattered. I kept fighting, but it didn't matter. Another dose came, and this time they were ready. The injection burned, and my vision doubled almost immediately. My limbs felt like rubber. I could still hear their voices, even as they blurred. One of them was saying something about the kids about a plant in Corpus Christi, about how the teachers were already dead. That part came clearer than anything else. "The kids are still there," someone said. "Quintana's waiting for sea routes to open." I don't know how I stayed awake. I don't know how I understood any of it. But I did. And just before the lights at the far end of the warehouse exploded in red and blue, I heard one of them shout. Someone talked. Doors slammed. Boots ran. Then silence. The cage rocked again, this time from the outside. And through the haze of that drug I heard a voice say, "We've got a woman here. She's alive." I tried to respond, tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. I think I said children. Maybe processing plant. Whatever I managed, it was enough. Because the officer's tone changed. His voice got louder, and then I felt hands lifting me from the cage, steady, careful hands. Outside, the sun was lower in the sky, and for the first time in 8 weeks I didn't feel completely alone. But I also knew deep down this was just the beginning of something much bigger than I'd been prepared for. The warehouse door had barely finished clanging open when the bolt cutters snapped through the cage lock. An officer's voice reached me through the haze, measured low and careful like someone trying not to spook a cornered animal. "She's sedated but alive," he said, calling back over his shoulder. I couldn't lift my head, but I could hear movement now. More boots on concrete, radios chirping, metal latches clicking. I felt hands beneath my arms lifting me out of the cage with deliberate steadiness. I tried to speak, but my jaw wouldn't move the way I needed. All I could get out was a single word: children. The officer holding me leaned in, repeating it back. I nodded, or maybe I just thought I did. Either way, they moved faster after that. They settled me in the back of a patrol car with the windows cracked for air. I could still smell the warehouse urine-damp straw, that unnatural chemical mix from the crates. The heat outside wasn't much better, but at least it wasn't sealed shut. My vision kept doubling and narrowing, and I couldn't seem to catch a full breath. Then the siren stopped again, and I saw the paramedics pulling up. They opened the car door and crouched beside me, murmuring to each other as they checked my pulse. Sedatives still active, one said. Low respiratory rate. Pupils slow. The other was already prepping an injection, said it might reverse whatever they gave me, assuming it was opioid-based. I didn't have the strength to ask. I just watched the syringe go into my arm and waited. It took less than a minute before the fog started to thin, like someone lifting the edge of a tarp inside my mind. The weight was still there, but now I could find words again. "Shrimp plant," I said. "Corpus Christi. They said that's where they're keeping the children." The paramedic met my eyes and nodded slowly, then stepped away to speak to one of the officers. When I looked back toward the warehouse, I saw Detective Elwell standing near the entrance, already in conversation with the team leader. He saw me and came straight over. "Dana," he said quietly, crouching beside the car. "You're all right? We've got you. You did everything right." I didn't say anything at first. Then I asked him, "Did they get away?" He glanced behind him. "4 are in custody. We stopped their truck 10 miles south of here. We're questioning them now." He waited a second, then asked, "What else did you hear inside?" I told him about the animals. The smugglers, the crates stacked with bright feathers and sedated cats. But mostly I told him about what they'd said about the kids and the plan to smuggle them out of the country disguised as undocumented minors. I remembered hearing a name. Quintana. I told him that too. Elwell's expression didn't change, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pink plastic hair clip in a sealed bag. "We found this inside," he said. "One of the kids, I didn't have to look twice." "Zoe Fernandez," I said. "She wore that every day." The next few hours blurred together medical checks, statements, team coordination. I was moved back to the station for observation, hooked to an IV and told to rest. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind kept circling the same images, those crates. The overheard voices the moment the cage door slammed shut behind me. At one point, a female officer named Martinez came in with a notepad and a tablet. She asked if I was ready to give a statement. I said yes, and I meant it. I told her everything. About the barn, the feather, the shoes, the forged delivery receipts. I told her what Daryl said to me, what I found burning in the fireplace, and how long I'd suspected that watch he wore didn't belong to him. She listened without interruption, taking notes the old-fashioned way, one line at a time. When I finished, she left the room and another officer came in not long after. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there like he didn't want to be the one to tell me. Then he cleared his throat and said, "They found them, the kids, at the shrimp facility, alive." For a moment I didn't move. I just let the words sit there. "All of them?" I asked. He hesitated. 13, he said. 2 didn't make it. I nodded, slowly, eyes locked on a point just over his shoulder. Do we know who? He didn't have an answer yet? I asked about the parents. He said they were being contacted. Some were already on their way to the station. There'd be reunions happening soon, carefully under supervision with counselors and medical teams. I asked if I could be there just to see them. Help if I could. I think they'd want to see you, he said. I'll check with Elwell. After they left me alone again, I sat there for a long while, staring at the IV drip as it clicked and cleared the rest of the sedative from my system. My body was recovering faster than my mind. The news about the 13 survivors gave me something to hold on to, but the number 13 rang in my head like an uneven bell. 2 were gone, and I didn't know which families would be told their child wasn't coming home. Eventually, they let me walk. I was given a visitor badge and allowed to wait near the family rooms. The hallway was crowded with staff moving between doors, quietly exchanging updates. Parents began arriving, some with arms crossed tight, others with nothing left but tears. Some glanced at me with the same suspicion I'd felt for weeks. Others didn't look at me at all. I didn't blame them. They didn't owe me anything. Then I heard a shout from down the corridor. Ms. Rowe. I turned and saw Alvin Torres, small and thinner than I remembered, but running full speed toward me. His face lit up when he saw mine. I dropped to my knees as he slammed into my chest, arms locked around my neck. I held him as tightly as I could. You're safe, I whispered. You're okay now. More children followed. Some walked slowly, scanning the hallway like it wasn't real. A few clung to the hands of officers or medical staff, but once they saw me, something in them softened. They came over, one by one. Some hugged, some didn't, but they all looked me in the eye, as if to say, we remember you. You mattered, and that was enough. Behind them, more officers moved the kids along, gently guiding them toward family rooms. I told them I'd see them again soon, that they needed to be checked out by the nurses, that their parents were waiting. As they disappeared down the hallway, I felt someone step up beside me. Elwell. He didn't say much, just rested a hand lightly on my shoulder and nodded. We need to talk, he said quietly. And I knew this wasn't over yet. There were still names we hadn't heard, still ground to cover, still answers buried in places no one wanted to dig. But the children were alive, and somewhere in all that darkness, that was still a beginning. Elwell handed me a cup of coffee that had gone cold somewhere between the vending machine and the interview room. I took it anyway. My hands needed something to do. He sat across from me, elbows resting on the table, and laid out a map of South Texas. No markings yet, just the roads, the rivers, the stretch of coastline curling down toward Corpus Christi. We've got a warehouse, he said, the one you were pulled from, a shrimp plant where we found the kids. That's 2 locations, both linked to Quintana. But this goes deeper, Dana. You said you heard them talk about a route sea lanes, cargo ports. He tapped the edge of the map near a cluster of blue lines that ran into the Gulf. We think they're using private boats to move some of the shipments offshore. We just don't know where they're docking. I stared at the map. The roads looked familiar. I'd driven stretches of them on field trips, teacher trainings, even grocery runs, but now they all felt different, like veins leading somewhere diseased. What do you need from me? I asked. Elwell leaned forward. We need to track it back. Find the link between Banner's farm and Quintana's network. Something we can prove paperwork names routes. Anything that holds up in court. He paused. You still have that student journal, the one with the feathers? I nodded slowly. It's at my house. Top shelf in the hall closet. I kept it because... I stopped short. I wasn't ready to say because I knew no one else would look. We left the station just after 5. The heat had started to settle, but the sun was still too high for comfort. My house was only 10 minutes away, tucked behind a cluster of live oaks that hadn't been trimmed since spring. I hadn't been back since the day I got the call, the day the fisherman pulled that trash bag from the bay. Everything inside was exactly as I'd left it. Mail scattered on the counter, lesson plans half marked in red pen. One slipper kicked under the sofa. I led Elwell to the hall closet and reached for the journal. It was light blue, covered in stickers. A few of the pages were stuck together from juice or glue. I opened to the one I remembered the sketch of the bird with green and gold feathers. Zoe had drawn it the week before they vanished. She said she saw it at the farm. I said quietly. By the sheds? I thought she meant a parrot or a peacock. Something brought in for fun. Elwell took a photo of the page with his phone, then flipped back through earlier entries. "Wait," he said. "Here." He held up a page dated 2 weeks before the field trip. In crayon, Zoe had drawn what looked like a row of cages on a truck bed. In the corner, a small stick figure waved from behind bars. She saw the transport crates, Elwell murmured, before the trip. Back at the station, they started pulling records, delivery manifests, supplier invoices, any documentation tied to Banner's farm. Most of it looked clean, but then one of the techs flagged a payment log from a month earlier. It listed a third-party hauler, El Pulpo Logistics, based in Harlingen. No real online presence, no working phone number, but the address listed matched an old grain silo complex abandoned since '98. Elwell asked me if I could ride with them, not inside the facility, just to confirm anything I might recognize. I agreed. It felt like the least I could do. We arrived just before midnight. The place was quiet, no lights, no motion. A breeze moved through the grass, carrying the faint smell of rust and diesel. The complex had 4 silos, each tagged with graffiti and chipped paint. A few corrugated sheds sat low near the back fence. The officers moved in first, sweeping the outer buildings. I stayed in the SUV windows, cracked eyes scanning the dark. Then one of them radioed back. "We've got tire marks. Recent. Southeast entrance." Elwell motioned for me to come out. I followed him around the side boots, crunching on gravel. That's when I saw it half buried in a pile of broken pallets and dirt. A blue lunchbox. Spider-Man. I knelt and opened it slowly. Inside were crumbs, a juice pouch, and a small laminated photo ID. The name said, Logan Reyes. My throat tightened. Logan was one of ours, missing since the field trip. I stood and looked toward the shed. The door hung crooked, a lock broken at the hinge. Inside there were crates. Not as many as at the farm, but enough. One was still bolted shut. I stepped back, letting the officers take the lead. When they forced the latch, a sharp odor rushed out, stale air, sweat, plastic. But it was empty. Whoever had been here was gone. They found more in the second shed, discarded restraints, packaging foam, and a duffel bag containing burner phones and a set of ledgers. Names, dates, drop sites. Some were crossed out. One column was marked delivered. Others said processing or pending. Elwell photographed each page, his face unreadable. Then he pointed to a single entry circled in red. Gulf Transfer Station, July 18th. Q. He tapped the page. That's 10 days from now. I looked closer. Next to the Q, someone had written priority shipment. No delays. Elwell's jaw clenched. "This is it," he said. "This is the route. They're moving the rest." He sent the photos back to headquarters. The agents started planning an intercept. But something gnawed at me. "Why move them now?" I asked. "Why not wait longer?" Elwell looked at me, then back at the shed. "Because they know we're close, and someone's tipping them off." It wasn't until the drive back that I remembered something small. Something that hadn't seemed important until right then. At the farm the day of the trip, I saw a man by the fence line. Not Daryl, not Clay, just watching. Sunglasses, ball cap, no expression. He wasn't part of the staff. I only saw him for a second, but now I could see his face clear as day. and I knew somehow he'd be at that transfer station too. Elwell dropped me at home just before dawn. The light was starting to bleed across the horizon. I sat on my porch watching the sky change. There were still cages out there, still kids waiting to be found. And now we had 10 days to stop them from disappearing forever. The Gulf transfer station wasn't much to look at from the outside, just a squat, weather-worn building nestled against the docks with old shipping containers stacked around it like barricades. The kind of place no one noticed unless they were supposed to. Elwell had arranged everything by the time I got there. Plainclothes units in unmarked vehicles, federal agents stationed along the waterline, a drone parked above us like a silent gull. The operation was tight quiet. No sirens, no floodlights. We couldn't risk spooking them. I sat in a van with the monitors listening to the buzz of radios and watching the black and white footage roll in from overhead. It was the kind of calm that feels like a held breath. At 2:07 a.m., headlights appeared from the coastal road. A box truck, same make and model used at the shrimp plant, turned off onto the gravel lot. No company markings. Windows tinted. It backed slowly toward the loading bay brake lights flickering red against the corrugated metal. 2 men got out, both matching descriptions from the ledger. One of them, the taller one, kept his hand tucked inside his jacket. The other tapped a code into the side panel. The loading dock groaned open and a low orange light spilled out across the ground. Another truck was already parked inside. That one had government plates, but the numbers were off. Not standard issue. Not local either. Elwell leaned toward the screen and said quietly, "They're using stolen credentials. Somebody gave them those tags." The agents didn't move yet. They were waiting for a third vehicle, a white van that showed up just after 2:30. That's when we saw him. The man in the ball cap. Same face I remembered from the fence at the farm. He stepped out of the van like he owned the place, motioned for the others to open the rear doors, and started checking the cargo with a flashlight. The angle was bad, but we could see shapes, small, rounded, wrapped in thick fabric. Movement. A few seconds later, he nodded. The taller man from the box truck pulled out a clipboard. They were logging the transfer. Elwell gave the order. Units moved in from both sides. No warning, no call-out. Just boots on gravel and doors yanked open before anyone had time to run. The man in the cap tried cut left toward the edge of the dock, but he didn't make it 10 yards before he was on the ground, face pressed to the concrete knees in his back. The van was secured first. Inside were 5 children, 4 boys, 1 girl, all under 10, all drugged but breathing. Elwell moved fast, barking orders, pointing officers where they needed to go. I stayed by the monitors, watching everything unfold like it wasn't real. They found more in the warehouse records phones, a burner laptop still logged into a spreadsheet. One column had initials. Another listed destinations. Belize, Honduras. One said Q Personal. That file had photos. Not just kids, but teachers, staff, journal entries, schedules. I recognized the layout. It was our school, our roster. They'd been watching us for months. They brought the man in the cap, his name was Javier Mercado, into a side room. I wasn't supposed to be near the interviews, but Elwell let me listen through the door. Mercado didn't say much at first, just stared at the table hands cuffed jaw tight. But when they asked about the field trip, his eyes changed. That was just one route, he said. There are others. Always others. When asked about the children, they hadn't recovered, he shook his head. Some are gone. Some were never yours to begin with. Then he smiled, this small, crooked thing, like he was proud of that fact. That's when I stepped away. I didn't want to hear another word. Later, while they processed evidence, I walked the perimeter. The dock smelled like salt and oil, and the sky was just starting to pale. I followed the edge to the seawall where the tide lapped slow and thick against the concrete. There, behind a rusted compressor, I found something half buried in sand, another feather. long green with gold along the edge. I picked it up and held it in my palm. It was dry, untouched by the water, like someone had dropped it not long ago. Elwell joined me a few minutes later. He looked tired but steady. Said the federal team was already drafting charges, smuggling conspiracy trafficking across state and national lines. I asked if that was it, if we had everyone. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No, Quintana's not here. And he won't be. He's watching from somewhere else, pulling strings we haven't even seen yet." I asked what came next. He said we'd keep following the paper, the ports, the names. "But you don't have to keep going," he added. "You've done more than anyone asked." I told him I wasn't finished, that I couldn't be, not when there were still kids whose names hadn't been called, not when I could still see Zoe's sketch in that notebook, the one with the bird no one believed existed. That morning I went home, showered, changed, and sat on my back steps with the feather still in my hand. And I realized something I hadn't understood before. This wasn't just about one trip or one farm or one man named Quintana. This was a system. Quiet, careful, built to hide in plain sight. And now that I'd seen it, I couldn't look away. They brought charges against 14 people that week. Federal indictments, racketeering, kidnapping, transport across state lines, possession with intent. Some pled out almost immediately. Others lawyered up and vanished. But it was the man in the cap, Javier Mercado, who cracked first. Not because he wanted to help, not out of guilt. It was leverage. He offered names in exchange for protection. Elwell said it was the only way to get to the next layer, and I understood. Still watching that man walk through a courthouse hallway with a bulletproof vest and a smug tilt to his chin, it didn't sit right. Not when I'd seen what was in that van. Not when I'd heard those kids cry out in their sleep. The children we recovered were moved to a temporary shelter just outside San Antonio. I wasn't supposed to visit. The agent said it could compromise the investigation, but one of the counselors called me directly. Said there was a little boy, Logan, who kept asking for Miss Dana. So I went. I brought puzzles and juice boxes and one of those scratch and sniff sticker books he used to love. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He didn't run up or speak right away. He just walked over, took my hand, and held it against his cheek, like he was checking to see if I was real. He'd lost a front tooth, had a scar on his chin I didn't remember, but he was here, breathing. That was enough for now. The fallout hit our district like a slow-moving flood. The school board held emergency meetings. The principal stepped down. Parents packed the gym with folding chairs and whispered questions no one wanted to answer. Some teachers quit quietly. Others stayed but looked older overnight. I went back to my classroom for one afternoon just to pick up the last of my things. The walls were still covered in art projects. Zoe's journal was in my desk drawer next to a dried-out glue stick and a missing button from someone's jacket. I tucked it under my arm and didn't look back. The court let me read a statement at Mercado's sentencing. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs about what was lost, about the trust that had been broken. He didn't look at me once, just stared at the floor like it was all noise. He got 30 years without parole. Some of the others got more. A few are still being hunted. Quintana's name came up during cross-examination, but no one could prove he gave direct orders. Not yet. He's still out there, and we know it. They raided a second transfer point 2 weeks later. This one in Georgia, just outside Macon. Same setup, same crates. They rescued 9 more children. One of them was from Oklahoma. Another had been reported missing in Phoenix back in 2015. They weren't even on our radar, which meant the ring was wider than we thought. Wider than most people want to believe. Elwell told me there'd been chatter about a property in Belize, some kind of safe house with guards and forged documents. That's where he'll be, he said, or somewhere just like it, watching the news, planning the next move. I asked if we'd ever bring him in. Elwell didn't answer, but his eyes said everything. I kept working with the task force as a consultant. Not officially, but enough. They let me review photos, match handwriting flag details that might get overlooked. I didn't tell many people what I was doing. It wasn't something you bring up in line at the grocery store. It changes how folks look at you. And it wears on you, too. The more you see, the harder it is to sleep. Or to walk through the mall without scanning every adult too closely. You start noticing vans that idle too long outside schools, men who linger a little too long at the park. You wonder how many times you missed the signs before. The shelter in San Antonio sent me updates when they could. Logan was placed with a foster family by the end of the summer. I mailed him a birthday card in October. Just stickers and a note that said, "You're brave, and you are not forgotten." I don't know if he understood what those words meant, but I needed to write them anyway. That November, I flew to Washington with Elwell to brief a Senate subcommittee. They wanted numbers, timelines, methods. What they got was names, ages, journal entries, a broken lunchbox, a green feather. I told them about Zoe's drawing, about the way the children were selected not at random but through routine, through paperwork we handed over without thinking. They listened, took notes. Some nodded. One wept. But policy doesn't move fast, not even when the fire's already in the house. I flew home the next morning, sat on my porch, and watched the street for a long time. It was quiet. Normal. But I knew better now. I knew what could live underneath normal. And I knew there were still families waiting for answers. Still mothers staring at empty bedrooms. Still folders in filing cabinets marked unresolved. That night I got a call from Elwell, short and to the point. "We've got something new," he said, "and you're going to want to see it." Then he paused. "It's about one of the kids who didn't come back." I didn't ask which one. I just said I'd be there in the morning, because no matter how many get rescued, there's always one more face still out there in the dark. I went with Elwell the next morning. No press, no formal briefing, just a plain sedan and a long drive down an unmarked road outside of Burnett County. The air was colder than it should have been for April, and the trees along the shoulder looked stripped bare like something had passed through and taken the color with it. We pulled up to a small metal building tucked behind an old salvage yard. Nothing about it looked remarkable. No signs, no lights. Just a padlocked chain-link gate and the low hum of power somewhere underground. Inside it smelled like dust and diesel. But deeper in past the loading dock and down a narrow hall they had something waiting. A laptop. Evidence cataloged under a warrant executed at a different site weeks earlier. The hard drive had been encrypted. But someone, maybe one of the ones we hadn't caught yet, left a file open by mistake. Elwell pulled up the video, paused it. "You should see this," he said. And then he hit play. It was dark, grainy, but I recognized the voices immediately. Lorraine, Tom, and the kids. They were alive in that footage, laughing, singing, pointing at something off-screen. I felt my throat tighten. The date stamp was from the day of the field trip. This wasn't surveillance. It was recorded from inside the bus. Whatever happened after, it didn't happen right away. There was time. That crushed me in a new way, not just because it meant they were scared, but because they probably trusted whoever told them it was all going to be okay. They traced the footage back to a man named Ellis Denton, another name on Mercado's list. Former military-turned-logistics contractor. He ran transit routes between the storage facilities. Never spoke to the kids directly, but he handled the movement. He'd fled the country months before. They think he's in Honduras now, but that wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed was the frame just before the feed cut out. Lorraine turning her head sharply, her face lit by a red glow from outside the window. I'd never seen her look scared before. We recovered more files in the weeks that followed. Journals, GPS logs, audio tapes. Some of them had names. Some had only numbers. But I read every page, not because I thought it would bring anyone back, but because I needed to carry some part of them with me. They weren't just the 15. They were Logan and Zoe and Maria and James. They were kids who made paper turkeys in November and forgot their mittens in January and drew hearts on the corners of their spelling tests. They had favorite songs, favorite teachers. They mattered. The task force eventually wound down. Cases shifted, budgets got pulled. But I still get calls. A tip from Florida. A name surfacing in Arizona. A missing child who suddenly matches a photo from our binder. I follow what I can. I pass it on when I need to. But I've learned not to expect resolution. Not in the way people think. Justice, when it comes, is never neat. It's slow-fractured, uneven. And it doesn't bring back the ones we lost. Sometimes I still hear Lorraine's voice, especially in early mornings when the sun's barely up and the house is quiet. I'll be washing a cup or folding towels, and I'll think of the way she used to sing with the kids when we lined up for lunch. Not loud, just enough to calm the room. I think of Tom, too, how he kept a slingshot in his desk drawer to make the kids laugh. They didn't deserve what happened. None of them did. But I carry them forward anyway. I still have Zoe's journal. I keep it in the drawer next to my bed. Some nights I read one of her entries. The handwriting's wobbly, the spelling's all over the place. But the last line she ever wrote it stays with me. I hope we see a goat. I like goats. They don't care what nobody says. I don't know why that made me cry the way it did the first time I read it. But maybe it's because she was still dreaming that morning. Still full of wonder. That's how I choose to remember her. If you've listened this far, thank you. These stories are hard to tell, but harder to forget. And if something in this stayed with you, consider sharing it. So no child's name ever gets left behind.